Success doesn't come from what you do once, it comes from what you do every single day. Motivation may start the journey, but consistency is what finishes it. Small steps repeated daily are more powerful than giant leaps taken once in a while.
When people imagine success, they often picture a dramatic breakthrough moment. They think of the one big deal that changes a business forever, the one workout that transforms a body, the one speech that suddenly makes someone a leader. But the truth is, it never happens that way.
Success rarely arrives as a single monumental event. It comes from what we do over and over again. It is the result of small, consistent actions that seem almost invisible in the moment, but compound into extraordinary outcomes over time. The challenge is that we live in a culture addicted to intensity. We celebrate the all-nighters, the sudden bursts of passion, the people who grind for a few days or weeks and burn themselves out. We glorify the sprint, but underestimate the marathon. Intensity feels exciting because it gives us a quick sense of progress, but that feeling fades. What really matters is not the big push once in a while, but the steady pace we can maintain every single day.
Think of a gym. Many people make a resolution at the start of the year, walk into the gym for the first time in months, and spend 3 hours lifting, running, and pushing themselves to exhaustion. They feel proud in the moment, but then they can't move for the next 3 days. The soreness discourages them, and soon they fall back into the same cycle of inactivity. Compare that to the person who shows up to the gym for just 30 minutes, 5 days a week. At first, the difference doesn't look dramatic. But after 6 months, the consistent person has built strength, endurance, and a habit that sticks. The intense person has a memory of a painful day and little to show for it. This same principle applies in every area of life. A writer who sits down for just 1 hour every morning and commits to writing, even when they don't feel like it, will finish a book within a year. Another writer may wait for inspiration to strike, and when it does, they pour out thousands of words in one sitting. But because they rely on intensity and not consistency, their work remains unfinished, fragmented, and inconsistent.
In business, the leader who builds trust with their team by showing up day after day, keeping promises, and leading with reliability will create a culture that thrives. A leader who only shows up when things are urgent or when inspiration strikes may get temporary results. But their team will never feel safe, never feel truly guided, and never build long-term trust.
Consistency matters more than intensity because it creates compound interests. Just like investing money, where small regular deposits grow into something much larger through time. Our small actions multiply when they are repeated consistently. Reading 10 pages a day doesn't feel like much, but over a year it adds up to more than 12 entire books. Meditating for 5 minutes daily might not feel transformative, but after months it reshapes the mind, lowers stress, and builds resilience. It is the compounding effect of time and repetition that makes consistency so powerful.
The real obstacle to consistency is our craving for results. We want change to be visible immediately. If we don't see the impact right away, we assume what we are doing is not working. And we stop. That's why so many people abandon their goals. But what we forget is that meaningful change is invisible in the short term. Progress doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It is silent, subtle, almost imperceptible, until one day the results are undeniable. The person who eats healthy for a week doesn't look different, but the person who eats healthy for a year transforms entirely. The person who saves a little money each month doesn't feel rich after the first few deposits, but years later, they have stability and freedom that others envy.
There's also a deeper reason why consistency matters more than intensity. It shapes identity. Every time you show up and do something, even in a small way, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. If you write every day, you are not just producing words, you are becoming a writer. If you exercise regularly, you are not just working on fitness, you are becoming an athlete in mindset and lifestyle. Intensity gives you a burst of effort, but consistency gives you transformation because it rewires how you see yourself.
The world does not reward occasional greatness. It rewards those who are dependable, reliable, and disciplined enough to stay the course. No one remembers the person who worked really hard for a few days. We remember those who quietly, steadily built something remarkable over years. We admire the musician who practiced every day until mastery became second nature, not the one who played feverishly for a week and gave up. We trust the friend who always shows up when they say they will, not the one who occasionally makes a grand gesture.
Consistency may feel boring compared to intensity, but that is the secret. Boredom is not a sign that something isn't working. It is often a sign that it is repetition builds mastery. Doing the same thing again and again is not a weakness. It is a strength. When you are consistent, you take emotions out of the equation. You don't depend on motivation, which is fleeting. You don't rely on willpower, which drains quickly. Instead, you build systems, habits, and routines that carry you forward even when you don't feel like it.
When people think about achieving their goals, they often talk about motivation. Motivation feels like the spark that gets us moving, the sudden rush of energy that makes everything seem possible. But the truth is, motivation is unreliable. It shows up when it wants to, and it disappears when things get hard. Relying on motivation is like relying on the weather. You have no control over it. Discipline, however, is different. Discipline is not about waiting until you feel like doing something. Discipline is doing it whether you feel like it or not. It is the steady force that keeps you aligned with your goals, long after motivation has faded.
The hidden power of discipline is that it creates freedom. At first, that might sound like a contradiction. Discipline seems like restriction, like rules and routines that box us in. But in reality, discipline is what allows us to live without being slaves to impulse, distraction, or procrastination. When you have discipline, you are not controlled by your moods. You are not at the mercy of excuses. You choose your actions instead of letting your feelings choose for you. That freedom is what makes real progress possible. Think about an athlete. Motivation might get them started, but it is discipline that gets them out of bed at 5 in the morning to train, even when they are tired. It is discipline that keeps them eating the right foods when no one is watching. It is discipline that pushes them to run one more lap, lift one more set, practice one more drill. And over time, that discipline compounds into excellence. People see the medals and the trophies and call it talent, but behind every great athlete is not just motivation, it is discipline, repeated day after day. The same is true in creative work. A painter cannot rely on inspiration alone. Inspiration comes and goes, but discipline ensures the brush still meets the canvas. A writer cannot wait for the perfect idea to strike. If they do, they might write once every few months. Discipline is what puts them at the desk daily, writing, editing, refining. Over time, discipline allows creativity to flourish because it creates the space where inspiration can show up. Without discipline, talent goes to waste.
Discipline is also what separates temporary effort from lasting transformation. Anyone can work hard for a short time when the excitement is fresh, but discipline is what carries us through the days when progress feels invisible, when results are slow, when no one is clapping for us. Discipline is what keeps us practicing when the audience is gone, studying when exams are months away, saving money when the bank account doesn't look any different yet. Motivation cannot carry us through those moments, because those moments feel heavy. Discipline, on the other hand, is not based on feelings. It is based on commitment. There is another hidden truth about discipline. It builds trust. When you are disciplined, you keep promises to yourself. Every time you wake up at the hour you said you would, every time you follow through on the plan you set, every time you complete the task you committed to, you are telling yourself, I can trust me. That trust creates self-respect, and self-respect fuels confidence. Without discipline, that trust is fragile. You say you will do something, but you don't follow through, and part of you stops believing in yourself. With discipline, you strengthen your word to yourself, and that becomes the foundation of unshakable confidence. Discipline also has the power to protect us from distractions. We live in a world filled with noise, with countless things competing for our attention. Without discipline, it is easy to get pulled in every direction, to start one thing and abandon it for another, to chase shiny objects instead of sticking with the work that matters. Discipline acts like a filter. It reminds us of what we said yes to, so we can confidently say no to what does not align. That is how focus is built, not through willpower alone, but through disciplined choices repeated daily.
What makes discipline so powerful is that it transforms effort into habit. At first, doing the hard thing feels like a struggle. Waking up early is painful. Resisting distractions takes energy. Saying no to comfort feels unnatural. But with discipline, repetition turns those struggles into second nature. The thing that once felt hard becomes routine, and the routine becomes who you are. This is why discipline is often invisible from the outside. People look at someone who seems effortlessly productive, healthy, or successful, and they think it must come easily to them. But what they don't see is the discipline built over time that made the hard things automatic. Discipline also gives us clarity. When you live without discipline, you are constantly negotiating with yourself. Should I work today or take it easy? Should I study now or later? Should I eat this or that? That constant decision-making drains energy. Discipline removes the debate. When you have discipline, the decision is already made. You work because it is time to work. You train because it is time to train. You focus because that is what you committed to. That clarity saves energy for the things that matter most, and it eliminates the stress of indecision. The hidden power of discipline is that it does not just change what we do, it changes who we become. Every act of discipline reinforces an identity. Each time you follow through, you are not just achieving a task, you are becoming the kind of person who follows through. Each time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you are shaping yourself into someone who does not back down when things get difficult. That identity becomes stronger than excuses, stronger than moods, stronger than circumstances. Discipline is not about punishing ourselves, it is about training ourselves to be stronger than the obstacles that would otherwise stop us. Trust is not built in a single moment. It is not the result of one grand gesture or one powerful speech. Trust is built in the small, repeated actions that demonstrate reliability over time. We know this instinctively in our personal lives. A friend who calls when they say they will, who shows up when they promise, who listens when we need them. Those small, consistent behaviors create a foundation of trust that makes the relationship strong. On the other hand, someone who makes big promises but rarely follows through may impress us once, but we hesitate to rely on them. In the same way in our own lives, our credibility, our influence, and even our confidence grow only when we prove, day after day, that we can be counted on. Consistency is the silent architect of trust. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout for recognition. It simply works in the background, strengthening bonds, whether in relationships, careers, or within ourselves. Think about a leader with 10 cells. If a leader delivers clear direction one day and then completely changes course the next, their team begins to feel uncertain. The inconsistency erodes trust. But if that leader communicates with steady honesty, follows through on commitments, and treats people with the same level of respect every time, the team begins to trust. They know what to expect. They feel safe. Trust is not built in the moments of intensity, but in the patterns of consistency. The same principle applies to the way we treat ourselves. Every time we tell ourselves we are going to do something and then fail to act, a little bit of self-trust is lost. We start to question whether we can depend on ourselves. On the surface, breaking small promises to ourselves may not seem like a big deal. Skipping the workout, delaying the project, ignoring the plan. But over time, those choices create a pattern that tells our subconscious, I can't trust me. And when self-trust erodes, confidence collapses with it. On the other hand, when we consistently keep our word to ourselves, even in the smallest things, self-trust grows. We begin to believe in our own reliability. That belief fuels confidence, and confidence shapes how we show up in every area of life. Trust built through consistency is also what allows relationships, whether personal or professional, to thrive under pressure. Imagine a team working under a tight deadline. Stress is high, challenges are everywhere. If the team has built trust through consistent collaboration, they don't crumble under the weight of stress. They know they can rely on each other, because reliability has already been proven. In contrast, a team without consistent trust fractures in difficult times. Doubt creeps in. Blame takes over. The difference isn't the level of talent, but the level of trust that has been compounded through steady, reliable action. Consistency and trust are inseparable, because consistency creates predictability. Humans crave stability. We want to know that the ground beneath us is solid. When someone behaves consistently, they give us that stability. It doesn't mean they have to be perfect, but it means they are reliable. A parent who consistently shows love and guidance creates a secure environment for their child. A brand that consistently delivers quality earns the loyalty of customers. A partner who consistently invests time and care builds a foundation for lasting intimacy. It's not about doing something extraordinary once, it's about doing something ordinary reliably. That reliability over time becomes extraordinary.
There is also a hidden dimension to trust, built through consistency. Influence. People do not follow those they cannot trust. A leader who wants to inspire others must first be consistent enough to earn their belief. Words alone do not inspire. Promises alone do not persuade. People watch patterns. They observe whether actions match words. When the two align, trust is built and influence follows. Without consistency, influence is fragile, because people are waiting for the next moment of disappointment. With consistency, influence is powerful, because people know the leader will not abandon them when circumstances change.
In personal growth, consistency creates trust not just with others, but with life itself. When you consistently put effort into a skill, into a relationship, into a dream, life eventually begins to respond. Opportunities come, doors open, results appear. But this only happens because consistency communicates seriousness. Life tests us with delay and difficulty, almost as if asking, can you be trusted to keep going when it's not easy? The people who prove through consistency that they can be trusted with responsibility are the ones who are eventually given it. Trust built through consistency also teaches patience. It reminds us that the most valuable things cannot be rushed. No relationship becomes deep overnight. No career becomes great in a single project. No reputation is built on a single success. Trust grows slowly, like a tree, rooted in the soil of consistency, watered by repeated actions. The slow pace can feel frustrating, especially in a world addicted to instant gratification. But the very slowness is what makes trust so enduring. Quick gains fade just as quickly. Trust that is built steadily over time becomes unshakable.
Even in the smallest interactions, consistency matters. A smile to a colleague every day builds a sense of warmth. Responding to messages promptly builds a reputation for reliability. Delivering quality in every assignment builds a name for excellence. These little actions, repeated consistently, create a web of trust that surrounds us. Others begin to know without a doubt who we are and what we stand for.
What makes trust so powerful is that once built, it multiplies when someone trusts you because of your consistency. They give you more responsibility, more opportunities, more loyalty. When you trust yourself through consistency, you take on bigger challenges, embrace greater risks, and expand your capacity. Trust opens doors that talent alone cannot open. And the foundation of that trust is always consistency. Every action we take leaves an imprint on who we are becoming. At first, those actions feel like isolated choices, small efforts that stand on their own. We think of them as tasks on a checklist, things to get done for the day. But the truth is deeper. What we repeatedly do is shaping us. Every repeated behavior begins to carve a pathway. And over time, those pathways turn into patterns. Those patterns turn into habits, and those habits form our identity. Consistency is not just about what we achieve. It is about who we become in the process. Consider a person who decides to run every morning. The first few days, it feels like effort. They must convince themselves to lace up their shoes, to step outside, to push through the discomfort. At that stage, they see themselves as someone trying to run, someone making an effort. But if they keep showing up day after day, something shifts. The act of running becomes more than just an effort. It becomes a habit. And as that habit sticks, their perspective changes. They no longer see themselves as someone who runs occasionally. They begin to see themselves as a runner. That identity reshapes not only their mornings, but the choices they make throughout the day. They eat differently, they sleep differently, they carry themselves differently, all because consistency has transformed effort into identity. The same transformation can be seen in learning. Imagine someone who practices an instrument every evening. At first, they might say, I'm learning to play the guitar. But after months of consistent practice, their language changes. They no longer say, I'm learning. They begin to say, I'm a guitarist. The repeated action of practice reshapes how they see themselves and how others see them. It is not the intensity of one long practice session that gives them that identity. It is the consistency of showing up again and again that forges it into who they are. This is why consistency is so powerful. It does not just change our outcomes, it changes our sense of self. A person who writes every day becomes a writer. A person who leads consistently becomes a leader. A person who chooses kindness every day becomes kind. Our identity is the sum of our repeated behaviors. The things we do once in a while may make us feel good, but they do not define us. What defines us is what we do consistently. There is also a profound psychological shift that happens when effort becomes identity. In the beginning, when effort feels external, it requires willpower. You must constantly push yourself to act. But when it becomes identity, it becomes internal. You no longer need to force yourself because it is simply who you are. A smoker who tries to quit might say, I'm trying to quit smoking. That is effort. But when they reach the point where they say, I'm not a smoker,
That is identity. The difference is enormous, because identity drives behavior naturally without constant negotiation.
Consistency is the bridge between effort and identity, because it provides the repetition needed for transformation. One workout does not make someone an athlete. One act of honesty does not make someone trustworthy. One day of discipline does not make someone strong. But repeating those behaviors consistently begins to embed them into character. Over time, others begin to see us differently, but more importantly, we begin to see ourselves differently. That self-perception becomes powerful, because people live up to the identity they believe about themselves. This principle is also what explains why bad habits are so difficult to break. If someone smokes consistently, they eventually internalize the identity of being a smoker. If someone consistently procrastinates, they begin to identify as lazy or unreliable. That identity then reinforces the behavior, creating a cycle. But the good news is, identity can be reshaped by introducing consistent new behaviors, even in small ways. We can cast new votes for a different identity each time we choose the new behavior. We are not just making progress, we are rewriting the story of who we are.
Consistency turning effort into identity also impacts how others interact with us. If someone consistently delivers on time, others begin to identify them as reliable. If someone consistently speaks with honesty, others identify them as trustworthy. If someone consistently shows courage, others see them as a leader. It is not a single act that gives us a reputation. It is the repeated pattern. Our identity in the eyes of others is built in the same way as it is in our own eyes, through consistency.
Think about the people you admire most. Chances are, what you admire about them is not a single extraordinary act, but the consistency of their behavior. The teacher who shows up every day to guide students. The mentor who always makes time to listen. The entrepreneur who never stops improving their craft. The parent who provides steady love and guidance year after year. Their greatness lies in the way they transformed effort into identity through consistency. The danger of relying on effort without consistency is that it creates a gap between who we want to be and who we actually are. We may tell ourselves we want to be fit, disciplined, creative, or trustworthy, but unless our actions align consistently, the identity never sticks. The mind cannot accept an identity that is not supported by repeated evidence. Consistency provides that evidence. Each time we act, we are casting a vote. One vote does not win the election, but repeated votes build the majority. Identity is decided by the majority of our actions, not the isolated effort of a few. The beauty of this process is that it does not require perfection. We do not have to be consistent 100% of the time to shape identity. What matters is the pattern, the repetition, the overall direction. Missing a day does not erase the identity. What matters is coming back again and again until the effort no longer feels like effort, but simply feels like who we are. That is the hidden gift of consistency. It frees us from constant struggle by embedding the behaviors into our identity, making them natural and automatic.
Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in life. It is what makes progress feel easier, what turns hard beginnings into unstoppable motion, what transforms a small step into a powerful stride. But momentum does not appear out of nowhere. It is not something we stumble upon by accident. Momentum is created, and the way it is created is through consistency. Small actions repeated over time generate energy, and that energy compounds until it feels like the universe itself is pushing us forward.
The hardest part of any journey is the beginning. Starting feels heavy, because there is no rhythm yet, no flow, no familiarity. The first day at the gym is uncomfortable. The first dollar saved feels insignificant. The first page of a book seems lonely and incomplete. In those early stages, effort feels greater than reward. Many people quit here, convinced the struggle means it is not working. But what they fail to see is that consistency at the start is not about immediate results. It is about building momentum. Every day we show up, even if the effort feels small, we are stacking energy behind us. Each repetition adds weight to the wheel, and eventually that wheel begins to roll on its own. Momentum is why consistent effort becomes easier over time. At first, waking up early to work on a dream feels like discipline. But after weeks of consistency, the body adjusts, the mind adapts, and what once felt hard becomes second nature. That is momentum at work. It is the invisible force that takes over once consistency has done its job. Suddenly, instead of pushing uphill every day, you feel the slope begin to tilt in your favor. The work carries its own energy, and progress becomes faster and smoother. And think of a snowball rolling down a hill.
At the top, it is small, fragile, and easy to stop. But as it rolls, consistency adds more snow, more weight, more speed. Eventually, the snowball is so large and powerful that nothing can stop it. That is exactly how momentum works in our lives. The little actions at the start don't look like much, but each one adds to the momentum. Over time, those actions become a force that moves forward with such strength that quitting becomes harder than continuing.
Momentum also magnifies results. A person who writes 1 page a day might not see much progress in the first week, but after months of consistency, they have chapters. After a year, they have a finished book. The consistent effort that felt so small in the beginning now feels enormous because momentum turned a trickle into a flood. The same applies to saving money, building a business, or improving health. Momentum transforms slow beginnings into exponential growth. That growth is not available to those who only act occasionally. It belongs to those who stay consistent long enough to reach the point where momentum takes over. There's also a psychological power in momentum. When you begin to see progress, no matter how small, belief grows. That belief fuels more action, and more action creates more progress. It becomes a loop of positive reinforcement. This is why consistency is critical at the start. It creates the early wins that build belief. Without those small, consistent actions, belief never has a chance to grow. With them, confidence expands, and confidence accelerates momentum even more.
Momentum has another unique quality. It carries us through resistance. Obstacles and setbacks are inevitable in any journey. Without momentum, those obstacles feel heavy enough to stop us. But with momentum, obstacles lose their power. A runner with no momentum might stop at the first hill. A runner with momentum charges up that hill because the rhythm of their stride carries them forward. In life, momentum built through consistency gives us resilience. We don't stop when it gets hard because the force of progress is already moving us. One of the most overlooked aspects of momentum is how it spreads. When you are consistent, your momentum becomes visible to others. People see your steady progress, your reliability, your dedication, and they begin to join in. Momentum attracts support, resources, and opportunities. A musician who practices every day begins to build a reputation. That reputation attracts collaborators and audiences. A business owner who shows up consistently builds momentum with customers, and that momentum attracts investors, partners, and growth. Consistency creates not only personal momentum, but collective momentum. Momentum also changes how we see ourselves. In the beginning, when effort feels heavy, we often doubt ourselves. We wonder if we are capable, if we have what it takes. But as consistency builds momentum, our identity shifts. We start to see ourselves as someone who doesn't quit, someone who makes progress, someone who moves forward no matter what. That identity fuels even greater momentum because we live up to the story we tell ourselves. We stop questioning whether we can do it and start proving that we already are. Momentum is not created by extraordinary effort in one day. It is created by ordinary effort repeated consistently. The person who spends 10 hours studying once may feel productive, but they do not create momentum. The person who studies 1 hour every day builds momentum that carries them through exams with ease. The person who spends one intense weekend building a business idea may feel inspired, but they do not create momentum. The person who works on their business a little every day creates steady motion that builds into success. What makes momentum so extraordinary is that it eventually feels unstoppable. What began as discipline turns into habit, and what began as habit turns into identity. At that stage, progress feels natural, like it is happening almost on its own. That is the reward of consistency. It gives you the force of momentum, a force so powerful that it makes the impossible possible.
Consistency is not glamorous, and it is rarely celebrated in the moment. It does not demand applause, and it does not always deliver immediate results. But consistency is the quiet force that separates those who dream from those who achieve. It is the steady rhythm behind discipline, the foundation of trust, the bridge from effort to identity, and the spark that creates unstoppable momentum. Every small action we take, when repeated day after day, compounds into something far greater than the action itself.
Consistency is what turns ordinary people into extraordinary leaders, what transforms fragile beginnings into lasting success, and what gives us the strength to keep going when motivation runs out. It is the key, not only to achievement, but to becoming the kind of person who can be counted on by others and by ourselves.